The Robert Shaw Memorial is a monument dedicated to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first African American unit in the Civil War, who distinguished themselves at Fort Wagner in South Carolina. There they took heavy casualties and distinguished themselves and African Americans as true fighting forces. During the first 2 years of the American Civil War, African Americans were not allowed to serve because of racism. But in 1863, President Abraham Lincoln passed the Emancipation Proclamation. This allowed African Americans to serve in the Army. By the end of the American Civil War, 10% of the Union Army was African American. Many people feel this is all because of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. The first African American regiment was the 54th Massachusetts Volunteers under the command of Robert Gould Shaw. This memorial is dedicated to him and his men, especially their actions at Fort Wagner in South Carolina. They took heavy casualties. 74 privates and 3 high-ranking officers were killed, and scores more were wounded in missing in action. It added up to a total of 286 casualties of the 600 men who assaulted the fort that day. Colonel Shaw was among the dead. The regiment took a 47.6 casualty rate during the battle. It was then, even though highly outnumbered and assaulting a fortress with exhausted men, the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Regiment established its reputation as a true fighting force. The 54th proved that African Americans were just as good as white soldiers. Shaw and his men are buried in a mass grave outside Fort Wagner. There were many heroic acts that day. One of the most heroic soldiers was Sergeant William H. Kearny, who saved the regiment's flag from being captured by the Confederates. Kearny was wounded 4 times while securing the flag. He was the first African-American soldier to ever win a Medal of Honor, his nation's highest award for bravery, courage, and valor. The soldiers not only distinguished themselves at Fort Wagner, but at James Island, the Battle of Ulusti, and Honey Hill, before finally returning to Boston in 1865 at the end of the war. Of the original 1,007 recruits, only 598 made it out alive. It was a 40.6 casualty rate. The monument itself was built by Augustus St. Gaudens. It took him nearly 14 years to complete, and the picture itself is Colonel Shaw on horseback, with 3 rows of infantry behind him on Beacon Street at Boston as they left the city for Fort Wagner. He was issued the order to make the sculpture in 1883 by Senator Charles Sumner from a committee led by Joshua Benton Smith, a former colleague of the Shaw family. It was his best sculpture. It took him the longest of all his sculptures to make. When he did show it on May 31st, 1897, it was labeled a masterpiece. The way St. Gaudens made the sculpture is truly amazing. His concern for accuracy was incredible. One of the most significant things about this sculpture is that it's the first ever sculpture that does not have stereotypical pictures of African Americans. He even hired 40 African American posers to make realistic models of heads of the soldiers in the actual background. But how he made the actual sculpture was based off of a painting on canvas St. Gaudens saw in France titled Campagna de France, 1814, by Jean-Louis Ernest Missionnaire, showing Napoleon with his infantry lined up in rows behind him, while Napoleon himself was on horseback. The sculpture had the same idea of that painting, with Shaw in front on horseback, with 3 rows of infantry behind him. The memorial itself is 11 feet by 14 feet, completely made of bronze, and cost a total of $7,000.